Darius was nothing more than a ragged street kid, bruised knuckles, hollow eyes driven away from the park cafe by sneering guards. Inside, billionaire Harrison Cole sat alone, spoon hovering over steaming soup. No one saw Isabella slip that vial into his bowl, except Darius. His pulse thundered in his ears as he stumbled forward, heart pounding like a war drum. Then, with a voice that shattered the hush, he screamed, "Don't eat that." They sneered at Darius, spat insults, and shoved him off the sidewalk, yet his single cry saved a life. If you believe heroes come in rags, hit subscribe now. Share this video to shatter the prejudice that tried to silence him. Let the world know courage isn't measured by wealth, but by the strength of your heart. Darius hunched against the chill of early afternoon shoulders, curled beneath his threadbare hoodie as he edged past the wrought iron fence of the park cafe. Every step felt like wading through judgment, the guards in starched jackets blocking his path with cold glares, the patrons on polished terraces whispering cruel jokes behind their manicured hands. He'd been here countless times, always chased away, always reminded that in this gilded world he was invisible, expendable. Inside, the cafe shimmered with opulence. Marble tables caught the sunlight, casting ghostly reflections across crystal glasses filled with sparkling water. Waiters in pressed vests moved like dancers delivering steaming bowls of bisque and towers of pastries drizzled in caramel. The air was heavy with the scent of freshly baked brioche lavender blooms and the soft hum of polite laughter. But that brightness only deepened Darius's isolation, highlighting the scars etched into his knuckles and the hollows beneath his eyes, where hunger gnawed day after day. He pressed his back against the cold metal rail fingers, curling around chipped paint as if drawing strength from it. He'd learned to fade into the background, head down, Boots' scuffed voice, silent, because every time he tried to speak, the guards barked more loudly, the wealthy dames and gents recoiled, mouths twisting in disgust. "Go on," they spat. "Get lost, street rat." Each insult landed like a blow, each shove burned with humiliation. And yet today, something in the air crackled differently. Darius's gaze drifted to the VIP table at the center, Harrison Cole, the real estate titan whose name adorned skyscrapers across 3 cities. He sat alone, silver hair catching the light, his lined face calm as he surveyed the menu. At his side, Isabella, his much younger wife, sat draped in designer silk, red lips curved into a polite smile that never reached her eyes. She flipped through her phone with delicate fingers, then slipped a small vial from her purse, her movements so practiced he almost mistook them for grace. Heat prickled Darius's skin as he leaned forward, straining to see. Isabella's hand trembled just enough as she unscrewed the cap, tilting the vial second by second until a clear liquid dropped into Harrison's soup. The surface rippled smooth, unremarkable, but Darius's heart stuttered. He'd scavenged half-empty bottles for scraps. He knew what clear poison looked like when it disappeared into broth. A sudden slam of a guard's baton to the fence jolted him back. "Beat it!" The guard roared, eyes blazing with contempt. Darius recoiled, nearly losing his grip. His pulse throbbed in his ears as he swallowed bile and fear. They saw him as nothing more than a trespasser, a nuisance unworthy of a second glance, let alone belief. But he'd seen everything. And if he stayed silent, a man would die. Trembling, Darius squared his shoulders. The cafe's glass walls gleamed with oblivious luxury. Beyond them, a child in rags bore witness to a crime. His throat closed with panic, every instinct screaming to flee. But one thought cut through the bubbling terror of knowing he could have stopped this and didn't. So he stepped forward, boots scraping on stone, heartbeat pounding like galloping hooves. He straightened his spine, lifted his chin, and let the world hush around him. This was no longer about grandeur or status. It was about courage. It was about demanding to be seen. And if the guards or the patrons tried to push him away again, he would stay because right now silence would kill. In that frozen moment, the trembling boy and the unflinching witness became one, a single breath before the shout that would shatter every assumption. Darius was no longer invisible. He was about to make them all listen. Darius pressed himself flat against the cold iron railing jaw, clenched so hard his teeth ached. Every fiber of his body trembled, not from the chill of the afternoon, but from the relentless sting of contempt. Seconds ago, a doorman in a polished uniform had shoved him boots, scuffing his tattered jeans. "Get lost, you rat!" The guard had barked, eyes cold as steel. The cafe's patrons had fallen silent for a moment, then erupted in mocking laughter, tiny, graceful ladies lifting their skirts to step back in disdain, suited men sneering behind tinted glasses. He was nothing but an unwelcome shadow in their world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Yet Darius couldn't tear his gaze away. Through the window he watched Isabella's slender fingers flip open a small vial. He'd seen enough in the streets to recognize the clear liquid that caught the sunlight as it slipped into Harrison Cole's steaming soup. His heart thundered, thump, 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 like the pounding hooves of a startled horse. For months he had scavenged scraps and scrounged half-drained bottles. He knew that taste, that weightless drop of poison dissolving in broth. A hot rush of anger flooded his veins. He recalled every harsh word spat at him. "Go back to the gutter. You filthy mongrel, I'd rather eat dirt than feed you." The crowd had treated him as if his skin carried dirt, his breath brought disease. Yet here he stood, the only witness to a crime far more monstrous than any insult thrown his way. His pulse surged every breath, a battle between fear and fury. The guard squared his shoulders, ready to lunge. Patrons shifted uncomfortably as if noticing the ragged boy's presence for the first time, and recoiling. Darius's throat constricted. Bile rose, but he swallowed it down, spitting out shame. This was not the first time he'd been driven away, but it would be the last time he stayed silent. He tightened his grip on the railing knuckles, whitening. Images of his brother's pleading eyes flashed in his mind, how he'd buried him in an alley after a brutal fight for coins. He'd promised himself he'd never run from injustice again. That vow crystallized in his bones, setting his blood ablaze. With a single jagged breath, Darius pushed off the railing. Every step toward the cafe felt like wading through a sea of daggers, patrons' eyes drilling into him, a chorus of hissed curses trailing in his wake. A waiter jerked his head, lips thinned in contempt. "Hey, street rat, get out," someone snarled. But Darius's legs moved on autopilot, fueled by a force greater than humiliation. Inside, the atmosphere shifted. Conversation halted mid-sip, forks hung suspended above plates. Isabella's eyes flicked up, panic flaring, as she realized the boy had crossed their invisible boundary. Harrison paused, spoons suspended, oblivious to the murderous plot that had just unfolded in his soup. The crystal-clear liquid had vanished, but the stain of betrayal remained. Darius's chest heaved. Sweat beaded at his hairline. He opened his mouth, voice trembling yet fierce. "Don't eat that." The words cut through the tense hush like a blade slicing away the veneer of elegance the cafe prided itself on. Dylan Cole's spoon dropped with a dull clink, and the world tilted. Shock rippled across every face. Some covered their mouths in horror. Others leapt to their feet, chairs scraping stone in their scramble for distance. Isabella's face drained of color, her carefully applied lipstick smearing at the corners as she recoiled. Guards rushed forward but paused, uncertain. Harrison's gaze locked on Darius, no longer a faceless nuisance, but a lone sentinel, risking everything to speak a truth nobody wanted to hear. Darius's pulse pounded in his ears, drowning out the low murmur of disbelief. He forced himself to hold the guard's gaze, to let them see the fire in his eyes, rather than the dirt on his clothes. "She put something in your soup," he rasped, throat raw. "I saw her twist the cap, pour it in when you weren't looking. You can't eat it." A tremor of doubt flickered across Harrison's weathered face. He set his spoon down, the subtle tremor of his hand, betraying the calm he'd worked a lifetime to master. Patrons backed away, creating a wide circle around the trio. Isabella's voice cracked as she tried to pull him aside, but her words splintered against the growing tide of suspicion. As Harrison leaned forward, studying Darius's flushed face, splashes of anger and desperation intertwining, something shifted. The billionaire's eyes, sharp from decades of scrutinizing deals and reading people's lies, softened. He glanced at Isabella, whose facade of innocence crumbled under the weight of 100 accusing stares. Darius stood firm, every inch of him aching, every insult he'd ever endured fueling his resolve. In that electric moment, the conflict between a powerless child and a powerful elite crystallized in justice versus courage, silence versus truth. The cafe's polished world had cracked, and through the fissures a small, ragged boy showed them the price of turning a blind eye. And in that tense, breath-held instant, the conflict erupted, setting the stage for a reckoning no amount of wealth or privilege could contain. Darius's shout still echoes in the glass-walled cafe as a stunned silence settles like dust. For a heartbeat, no one moves. Then the doorman's fist tightens on the railing, fury flaring in his eyes. But Darius stands his ground, chest heaving, dirt-caked boots planted firmly on the marble floor. In that charged moment, something in him shifts. He is no longer the frightened street rat they've always dismissed. He is the only witness to a murder in the making. He glances around, spotting the trembling hands of the waiter, frozen mid-pour, the wide eyes of patrons, snapping between him and the poisoned soup. Isabella's face has gone chalk white, a single droplet of sweat tracing down her temple. Harrison Cole pushes back his chair spoon, clinking against the table like an alarm. All of them, guards, guests, servers, see Darius now, not as a nuisance to be driven off, but as someone demanding to be heard. A surge of calm washes over him, replacing the adrenaline's chaos. He remembers every shove, every insult that drove him from this place. Go home where you belong, you filthy gutter child. We don't serve your kind. Each hateful word had stung like a whip, telling him he had no right to exist here. Yet here he stands, compelled by a higher truth. He cannot walk away, not when a man's life hangs in the balance. He raises a hand, voice steadier now. Call the police. It isn't a plea, it's a command. The head guard glances at his radio, hesitates, then jerks his head toward the entrance. A flash of triumph lights Darius's eyes. He knows they won't dare ignore a direct order from Harrison Cole. Turning back to Isabella, Darius presses the edge of his palm against the tabletop, leaving a smudge on its polished surface. You need to tell him why he says, voice low but unbreakable. Show him the vial. His words ring out, carrying the weight of every time he'd been silenced, every sneer that told him he was invisible. Now his voice is the one that cannot be ignored. Isabella's breath hitches. She nearly lurches backward, hand flying to her throat as if to catch the lie that's tangling in her lips. Darius watches her every flutter of her eyelashes, every tremor in her jaw, knowing that beneath her designer silk and lacquered nails, she is just as vulnerable as he once was. Her perfect facade crumbles under the truth he's wrested from obscurity. He leans in, careful to stay within the circle of witnesses. You poured it in while he was looking at his phone, he says, eyes locked on Harrison's. You twisted the cap, tilted the vial, just 2 drops, but that's all it takes. He can feel the cafe's collective heartbeat shift, a low hum of horror and fascination rising like steam. In that charged atmosphere, Darius can almost taste the tension. He imagines the headlines that will follow: Street Kid Saves Billionaire, the boy who wouldn't be invisible. But he pushes the thought aside. This isn't about fame. It's about justice. He watches Harrison's face, lined with years of deals and betrayals, soften in recognition. The billionaire's lips part as if ready to speak, but Darius cuts him off with another firm command. Test it. Have them test the soup right now. A waiter steps forward, trembling, and nods toward the kitchen. Darius's pulse surges again, this time with purpose rather than fear. He's orchestrating the reckoning, ensuring that Isabella cannot slip away with her lies. He sees the head guard return, nodding at the waiter, and the promise of investigation settles like a stone in his chest. But the moment isn't over. Isabella's eyes flick to the exit. She's calculating a desperate escape. Darius notices the tremor in her hand as she fumbles for her purse, no doubt seeking something, maybe a phone to call for help, maybe another vial for a final act of desperation. He tightens his grip on the railing, knuckles white. Don't even think about it, he warns, voice low but carrying across the room. You're not going anywhere. His words are a lifeline for Harrison, who rises again, watching Isabella's hesitation. Darius steps back slightly, giving the billionaire room to act. He's done more than save a life, he's forced a reckoning on privilege and prejudice. Every whisper that once told him he was worthless now echoes back as testimony to his courage. As the steps of approaching police officers begin to drum in the distance, Darius exhales the weight of every shove and sneer, lifting, replaced by the power of his own truth. He has crossed the threshold from outcast to catalyst. The plan he never believed he had to confront, to expose, to demand justice has unfolded in a pulse-quickening crescendo. And in that crescendo, Darius reclaims not just Harrison Cole's life, but his own dignity. He stands tall shoulders, squared, ready to watch the aftermath. The battle isn't over, but the turning point has arrived. A boy who was nothing to them has become the author of their reckoning. And as the doors swing open to admit uniformed authority, Darius knows that the world will never be able to ignore him again. Darius's shout still rang in the marble chamber when Isabella lunged for Harrison's arm, eyes blazing. But he was already on his feet chair, clattering backward. "Don't touch him," he barked, voice slicing through the stunned hush. The guard sprang forward, but Darius planted himself between Isabella and Harrison, chin raised, spine rigid, no longer the trembling street rat they'd driven away. Isabella's breath came in sharp gasps. She yanked at Harrison's sleeve. "He's lying. He's a filthy kid. You don't know him." Her words splintered against the hard stare of every witness. A waiter, face ashen, hovered with a tray of water. Another fumbled for his phone to record. Darius's pulse throbbed, but he held the world's gaze. "You poured poison into his soup," he said, stepping closer, each stride a testament to defied prejudice. "I saw you twist the cap, tilt the vial. You wanted him dead." A low murmur swelled into a roar of outrage. Patrons pressed against tables, clutching phones and wallets. Even the guards hesitated, flashlights dancing over polished floors. Harrison's face rippled with shock, his spoon suspended like a guilty thought. He looked at Darius, dirt-streaked, boot-scuffed, but unbowed, and nodded once, slow and deliberate, as though he finally saw the boy's courage. The head guard barked an order into his radio. "Get that vial," he snapped. A junior officer dashed to Isabella's purse and produced the tiny glass bottle cap, rolling across the tiles. It glinted under the chandeliers, damning evidence against her. Isabella's lips quivered. Her facade crumbled as she realized this wasn't a scene she could buy her way out of. Darius watched closely, remembering every shove and curse that had preceded this moment. He felt a fierce satisfaction as the vial was held aloft, each drop inside a confession. He could almost hear the echo of every disparaging remark. "Go back to the gutter. We don't serve your kind," rebounding around the marble walls. Now they surrounded a boy who refused to be ignored. Isabella lurched backward, stumbling over a fallen chair. "You can't do this," she screamed, voice cracking. "You don't understand. I did it for us." But no one moved to help her. Harrison rose tall in his tailored suit, eyes cold. "Explain yourself," he said, voice flat. "Tell us why you tried to kill me." Her shoulders slumped, tears mingling with mascara. "I couldn't stand being invisible next to him," she sobbed. "He was never going to die this year, and I needed freedom." The confession burst from her like poison itself, sealing her guilt. Darius felt a tremor of triumph, but tempered by the gravity of what he'd invoked. He took a step back, letting Harrison take center stage. The billionaire's hand shook as he signaled the guards. "Arrest her," he said quietly. "Attempted murder." A thud of boots followed Isabella's designer heels, replaced by the cold clank of handcuffs. As she was led away, heads turned to Darius. Faces that had scowled now softened. Some offered hesitant nods, others whispered apologies they'd never voiced. A waiter approached, whisking away the poisoned soup with trembling hands. Darius's heart thudded against his ribs, a drumbeat of vindication. Harrison stepped forward and placed a heavy hand on Darius's shoulder, eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you," he said, voice hushed but fierce. "You saved my life." In that instant, the hungry boy in rags became something else, a hero who shattered every barrier of wealth and prejudice. The cafe exhaled around them, a collective gasp of wonder and relief. Darius stood tall, boots firmly planted on the marble floor he'd once been forbidden to tread. In saving a life, he had reclaimed his own. And as the noon light filtered through crystal windows, it illuminated the truth. Courage isn't born from privilege, but from the unwavering belief that even the smallest voice can demand justice. A ripple of disbelief washes over the cafe as uniformed officers lead Isabella away in handcuffs. The polished guests, once so quick to sneer at Darius's ragged hoodie and scuffed boots, now stand, frozen cups trembling in their hands. Madame Dupont, who only moments ago had curled her lip at his dirt-streaked face, wipes a tear from her cheek, her perfectly manicured nails betraying a sudden shame. Across the room, a businessman in an Armani suit lowers his gaze instead of mocking eyes, darting toward Darius with a flicker of apology. Harrison Cole remains seated at the center table soup, long forgotten his lined face a mask of shock and gratitude. His voice breaks the heavy silence. Every one of you judged him in a heartbeat, dismissed him without a second thought. But it was Darius, this boy you called rat, you shoved off your sidewalk, who had the courage to speak the truth. His words echo through the marble hall, punctuated by the distant wail of sirens fading outside. Patrons shift uncomfortably, memories of their own whispered slurs, and turned back, surfacing like bitter bile. Some cover their mouths. Others shake their heads slowly, as if unable to reconcile the child they scorned with the savior who now sits beside their fallen idol. A few reach for their phones, not to record another scandal, but to send messages. You have to see this. Unbelievable. That boy. Wow. Social media notifications will explode within seconds, carrying Darius's name far beyond the cafe's glass walls. The head guard, still clutching the railing where he'd shoved Darius moments earlier, steps forward and offers a curt nod of respect. It's a small gesture, but in this world of haughty contempt, it feels seismic. The waiter who'd once snubbed him offers a plate of untouched bread and water, his hand trembling as he places it before Darius. Embarrassed apologies murmur through the staff. They clear away the poisoned bowl, as though erasing a stain on their conscience. Outside, a crowd has gathered at the windows, curious onlookers drawn by flashing police lights. They peer in, jaws dropped, eyes wide, as they witness the boy who refused to remain invisible. Journalists elbow their way forward, microphones thrust in Darius's direction. But Harrison holds up a hand. "Let him be," he says firmly. This moment belongs to Darius, yes, but it belongs to every one of us who learns that courage can't be bought. Harrison rises his cane, tapping the marble in a deliberate rhythm. He crosses to Darius and kneels, lifting the boy's chin so their eyes meet. "I owe you my life," he says, voice thick. "And more than that, I owe you my respect. You have a place at my table where you belong." He gestures to the empty chair across from him. In that instant, the cafe's invisible barrier dissolves. Darius, trembling with disbelief, glances around at the stunned faces, friends and strangers alike, before sliding onto the seat. A tentative applause begins, soft at first, then swelling into a roar of approval. It's the kind of sound that shatters glass ceilings and rewrites expectations. Darius's lips part in a shy smile, tears glistening at the corners of his eyes. Never before has he felt so seen, so recognized. The boy who lived in alleys, the one guards chased away, now feels the weight of genuine admiration. As the cafe slowly returns to life, waiters refilling glasses, guests lowering their phones, the lesson lingers in the heavy air. Prejudice can shatter us, but truth and courage can rebuild a world worth believing in. And all it takes is one voice, one outstretched hand, one ragged child who refuses to be invisible. They laughed at Darius's dirt-streaked face as if his skin carried only filth, never imagining that same boy would stand between life and death. In those moments, his knees quaked like newborn fawns, throat raw as sandpaper, but he refused to shrink. Every sneer and shove had fueled a fire in him, sharpening his resolve. Remember the way the doorman's baton cracked against the rail? The echo of that blow was nothing compared to the thunder of Darius's heartbeat when he screamed, "Don't eat that." This isn't just a story about poison in soup or cuffs clinking, it's a mirror held up to our worst impulses. We recoil at a ragged coat and scuffed boots because we've been taught to fear what we don't recognize. Yet courage doesn't bow to status. Justice doesn't care about price tags. Darius's hands trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of truth he carried alone. His voice cut through marble halls more powerfully than any empire's decree. What if we'd all looked away? What if every one of us had whispered, "That child is nothing to me"? Then a man would have died, and the world would have been poorer for it. That moment of choice, the split second between silence and action, is where our humanity is defined. Darius teaches us that empathy isn't optional, it's our responsibility. You've seen the headlines, "Street Kid Saves Billionaire." But the real headline should be, humanity saved by a boy we tried to forget. His victory isn't just for him or Harrison Cole. It's for every overlooked soul shoved to society's margins. Let this lesson burn itself into your conscience. The smallest voice can topple the tallest ego, and the most tattered cloak can hide a hero's heart. So the next time you feel that flicker of disdain for someone beneath you, remember Darius's frozen gaze, the tremor in his voice, and the life he pulled back from the brink. Because true strength isn't measured in wealth or power, it's measured in the courage to stand up when no one else will. Darius stood beneath the glittering chandeliers, one last time, the weight of every sneer and shove now replaced by the echoes of applause. Remember how they spat at him, brandishing contempt as if his ragged hoodie made him less human. They were stunned when his single cry shattered their world and saved a life. If you felt that jolt in your chest, that uncomfortable twinge of guilt, you're not alone. We all carry the power to choose compassion over contempt, to see worth where others see waste. Darius taught us that courage doesn't require a suit or a title, only the willingness to speak truth in the face of privilege. So here's your moment, hit subscribe if you believe no voice is too small to demand justice. Like this video to stand with every outsider who's ever been told to go away. Share it now. Let Darius's story travel beyond these glass walls, a reminder that heroes aren't born in boardrooms. They rise from the margins. Because the world we want, one that honors every life, begins when we refuse to look away. Don't let this be just a story. Make it our rallying cry.